Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Digital Mindset Podcast. I'm so glad you're here today because we're diving into one of those fascinating, sometimes awkward, and always relevant topics: how culture shapes the way we behave online. Yeah, we're talking about social media etiquette across cultures, the unspoken rules, the digital manners, and those invisible lines that decide whether your post is seen as cool, polite, or totally inappropriate on the other side of the world. Think about it. You like someone's photo on Instagram. Maybe in your country it's a friendly gesture, but somewhere else that might seem too personal, even a little weird. You comment "cute" on someone's selfie, and it feels harmless. But in a different culture, that could cross a line. Or maybe you join a heated debate on Twitter, thinking you're just expressing your opinion, only to realize later that in another culture, public disagreement might be seen as rude or even disrespectful. That's the thing about living in a hyper-connected world. Social media collapses distance, but it doesn't erase culture. So today, let's unpack this digital puzzle. Why people from different countries behave so differently online. How culture influences our tone, our humor, our timing, even our emojis. And most importantly, how understanding these nuances can help us avoid misunderstandings and build genuine, respectful connections across borders. Let's start with something simple. What does etiquette even mean in the digital era? In face-to-face communication, we rely on a lot of cues: tone of voice, eye contact, body language, and even silence. But online, most of that disappears. We have only text, images, emojis, videos, and timing to convey what we mean. That's where etiquette comes in. Social media etiquette is about using digital platforms respectfully, responsibly, and culturally appropriately. It's not about being stiff or robotic. It's about understanding the norms that make others feel comfortable and valued in an online space. But here's where it gets interesting. There's no universal rulebook for social media manners. Just as greetings differ from culture to culture, a handshake in the US, a bow in Japan, a cheek kiss in France, our digital gestures vary too. And what feels polite or respectful in one culture might feel intrusive or even offensive in another. Let's take a simple example: posting selfies. In Western cultures, especially in the US or Australia, sharing selfies is seen as self-expression, confidence, individuality, and fun. People often post captions like "feeling good today," or "just me enjoying the sunshine." It's not necessarily arrogance, it's self-celebration. But in some Asian cultures, particularly in Japan or South Korea, posting too many selfies can be interpreted as attention-seeking or lacking humility. Instead, people prefer group photos or more aesthetic images that subtly reflect their personality without saying, "Look at me." Even in Vietnam, for instance, there's this mix of influences. Younger people tend to follow global trends, but there's still an underlying value of modesty and collectivism. So, while posting a selfie isn't frowned upon, overdoing it might attract comments like "song ao qua," which loosely translates to "too virtual," meaning too self-absorbed. And if we go to the Middle East, cultural and religious norms also shape what's acceptable to post. Photos revealing too much skin might be completely normal in Los Angeles, but they could cause offense or even social backlash in Riyadh or Dubai. So, what's just fun in one culture might be disrespectful in another. Now, let's move to the tone of online communication, a huge source of cultural misunderstanding. In the US, directness is often valued. Saying exactly what you mean is seen as honest and efficient. But in many Asian cultures, Japan, China, Korea, Vietnam, people tend to communicate more indirectly to maintain harmony. If an American manager says, "This report isn't good enough," it's considered constructive feedback. But if a Japanese manager said that publicly, it could be seen as humiliating. Online, the same rule applies. A direct comment like "you're wrong" might sound straightforward to one person, but rude or confrontational to another. On platforms like LinkedIn, for example, Americans often use a confident and assertive tone, "proud to announce my promotion." But in Scandinavian countries, such self-promotion might feel boastful. They prefer subtlety, something like, "excited to continue my journey in this new role." The difference is subtle, but it reflects deep cultural values. The US celebrates individual achievement, Scandinavia values humility and equality. Another fascinating difference is humor. Humor doesn't always translate well across cultures, especially online. Sarcasm, irony, or dark humor might be hilarious to some but confusing or offensive to others. British people, for example, are famous for their dry, self-deprecating humor. A Brit might tweet, "I love meetings that could have been emails. They really make my day." Other cultures might take that literally, or see it as passive-aggressive. In Japan, humor often revolves around puns or wordplay, and joking about serious topics is considered inappropriate. In contrast, American or Australian humor often uses exaggeration, satire, or irony, things that don't always translate neatly across languages. On social media, where tone and facial expressions are missing, humor can easily backfire. What one person meant as a playful comment might be read as an insult by someone from another culture. And then there's the art of liking and commenting. You might not think twice before liking your coworker's vacation photo or commenting under a friend's new outfit post. But in some cultures, these interactions carry different meanings. In many Middle Eastern and South Asian societies, interacting too casually with the opposite gender on social media might be frowned upon. A simple like could be interpreted as flirting or disrespectful behavior. Meanwhile, in collectivist cultures like Indonesia or the Philippines, people tend to like and comment frequently as a sign of community support. Not engaging might even be seen as cold or unfriendly. On the other hand, in Germany or Finland, where privacy and personal boundaries are valued, people may engage less frequently, not because they dislike your post, but because online silence is perfectly normal. So, next time someone doesn't reply to your story or doesn't comment on your photo, don't assume they're ignoring you. They might just be following their own cultural norms of online restraint. Let's also talk about language and emojis, the tiny symbols that can carry big cultural meanings. Language is deeply tied to culture, and the words we choose online often reflect how we think. For example, English speakers often use casual, expressive language online. "OMG, that's amazing!" Or "LOL, can't stop laughing." But in cultures where communication tends to be more formal, like Korea or Germany, such expressions might feel too exaggerated or childish. Even emojis aren't universal. The emoji, for instance, is used in Western countries to mean thank you or please, but in Japan, it's often understood as "I'm sorry" or "I beg you." The emoji, which many Westerners use to express laughter, is sometimes replaced in Asian cultures with WW, short for warai, meaning laugh, or even 555 in Thailand, because the number 5 is pronounced ha. And let's not forget that some emojis have double meanings. For instance, the E or N emojis, used jokingly in the US to represent body parts, could be completely misinterpreted in more conservative societies. So even the simplest digital gesture can have layers of meaning, depending on who's reading it. Now, consider time and response expectations. How fast should you reply to a message or comment? That too varies across cultures. In the US, quick replies are often expected. It shows engagement and professionalism. In Japan, people may take longer to reply because they're crafting a polite and thoughtful response. In Latin American cultures, online communication tends to be warm and chatty. Messages often include emojis, friendly greetings, and a sense of personal connection. Meanwhile, in Northern Europe, brevity and efficiency are appreciated. No need for long greetings or emotional expressions. So, if someone from Sweden replies with just "okay," they might mean "sounds good." But someone from Brazil might interpret that as cold or dismissive. The same goes for workplace communication. On Slack or Teams, Americans may use exclamation marks liberally, "thanks," or "great job," while Germans or Dutch professionals might prefer a simple, neutral tone. "Thank you." No emoji, no fluff, just business. One area where cultural differences become striking is public versus private sharing. Americans, for example, are generally open about their personal lives online. They share family milestones, opinions, and even struggles, often framed positively as authentic storytelling. But in more collectivist societies, privacy and saving face are crucial. People might share photos of landscapes, food, or group gatherings rather than personal thoughts or individual achievements. In cultures like China or Vietnam, sharing something too emotional or controversial could be viewed as seeking attention or disturbing social harmony. And then there's the matter of politics and opinions. In the US or France, debating political topics on social media is common, even expected. But in countries like Singapore or Thailand, political discussions online can be sensitive or even risky. So what looks like an open conversation in one country could be perceived as disrespectful or dangerous in another. That's why cross-cultural awareness isn't just about politeness. It's about safety, reputation, and respect. Let's dive into a few real-world cross-cultural examples that show how these differences play out. A few years ago, an American fashion brand ran a campaign in China featuring a model trying to eat Italian food with chopsticks. It was meant to be funny, a cultural mashup, but it backfired spectacularly. Many Chinese netizens saw it as disrespectful, reinforcing stereotypes that portrayed Chinese people as unsophisticated. The backlash was so strong that the brand had to issue a public apology. This case showed how a lack of cultural sensitivity on social media can damage not just relationships, but global reputations. On the other hand, consider how K-pop fans have redefined social media activism. In Western culture, online activism often takes the form of hashtags and petitions. But in South Korea, fans have mobilized through platforms like Twitter and Weverse to coordinate charitable donations, social movements, and even flood hateful hashtags with positive messages. It's a form of collective digital action deeply rooted in Korea's community-oriented values, showing how social media can reflect not only individual behavior but national character. Then there's the story of workplace miscommunications. An American executive posted on LinkedIn, "Proud to announce we hit our quarterly target." A Japanese colleague congratulated him privately, saying, "Please take care not to appear arrogant." The executive was puzzled. He didn't see anything arrogant in celebrating success. But in Japanese business culture, humility is a core value. Success is often credited to teamwork, not individuals. That small exchange illustrates how tone, timing, and self-presentation, even online, can carry cultural weight. At this point, you might be wondering, so how can we navigate all these differences without constantly worrying about offending someone? That's a great question, and one we'll explore more deeply in the next part of this episode. But before we get there, let's think about what makes social media so powerful and so complicated in the first place. It's the collision of cultural worlds. For the first time in human history, people from every corner of the planet can interact instantly. A teenager in Manila can duet with someone in London on TikTok. A small business owner in Nairobi can sell to customers in Paris. Yet, despite that global connection, our cultural lenses remain local. We see the world through our upbringing, our values, our communication styles, our comfort zones. When we post online, we're not just sharing content, we're sharing culture. Every emoji, every word choice, every like or retweet says something about how we see ourselves and others. And when those tiny signals cross borders, misunderstandings can arise, sometimes funny, sometimes awkward, sometimes deeply serious. So maybe the question isn't, what's the right way to behave on social media? Maybe it's, how can we be more culturally intelligent, more aware, more empathetic, and more curious when we communicate online? Because etiquette isn't just about avoiding mistakes. It's about building bridges. It's about recognizing that behind every screen is a person shaped by their history, language, values, and worldview. And if we can understand that, if we can see digital etiquette as cultural empathy in action, then maybe social media won't just connect us faster, it'll connect us deeper. When we start paying attention to the subtleties of online behavior, something incredible happens. We stop seeing the internet as just a giant noise of opinions and trends, and we start seeing it as a living, breathing ecosystem of cultures interacting in real time. Every scroll, every comment, every message becomes part of that global conversation. So let's talk about how we can actually navigate that space wisely. What does it take to be culturally intelligent online? How can we respect others while still expressing ourselves authentically? The first key is observation before participation. When you enter a new online space, whether it's a Discord community, a Facebook group, a subreddit, or even a regional Twitter trend, Take a moment to observe. Notice how people communicate. Are they formal or casual? Do they use a lot of emojis? Do they share opinions openly, or do they prefer humor and subtlety? This isn't about mimicking others. It's about tuning your communication style to the rhythm of that culture. Just like you wouldn't shout in a quiet library, you wouldn't overshare or use aggressive humor in a culture that values modesty and restraint. For example, in many Japanese online forums, it's common to use pseudonyms and avoid personal details. People tend to keep a respectful distance, valuing privacy and anonymity. Meanwhile, in American online communities, users often sign off with their real names, share personal opinions freely, and expect open dialogue. Both are valid, just different. So before posting or commenting, take a minute to listen, even digitally. You'll be surprised at how much cultural tone you can sense if you just pay attention. The second key is learning the context behind content. Social media is full of symbols, idioms, and memes that carry meanings unique to specific cultures, and misunderstanding them can lead to awkward or even offensive interactions. For instance, a meme that's funny in one country might reference a sensitive political issue in another. A seemingly harmless hand gesture emoji might have a completely different meaning elsewhere. Remember the OK hand sign? In the US, it's a simple sign of approval. But in some parts of South America, it's considered an insult. Online, that same symbol could easily be misinterpreted by someone unfamiliar with your intent. When you see trends or hashtags going viral globally, take a second to look up what they mean before jumping in. It's not about being overly cautious. It's about being informed. Being culturally aware doesn't limit your expression. It expands it. Because the truth is, the internet isn't one big culture. It's 1,000 little ones, coexisting, overlapping, colliding, and constantly evolving. The third key is choosing empathy over assumption. When someone online reacts differently than you expect, maybe they seem distant, overly polite, or too emotional, resist the urge to judge. Ask yourself, could this be cultural? Imagine a situation. You post a heartfelt message, and your European colleague replies with just thanks. You might think, wow, that's cold. But in many Northern European cultures, brevity is a sign of respect for time and efficiency, not indifference. Or you send a straightforward question to your Japanese coworker, and they reply after a long delay with a carefully worded message. You might think they're avoiding you, but in reality they're being thoughtful, making sure their response is polite and accurate. When we interpret everything through our own cultural lens, we risk misunderstanding people who are simply being themselves within their own norms. Empathy means giving people the benefit of the doubt. It means assuming positive intent, especially in an environment where tone and nuance are so easy to lose. Now, let's move into something practical. Universal principles of good digital etiquette that tend to transcend cultures. Even though every society has its own nuances, there are a few rules that seem to apply almost everywhere. Respect privacy. Don't tag people in photos without permission. Don't share screenshots of private conversations. In some cultures, privacy violations are not just impolite, they're deeply offensive. For example, in Germany, where data protection is taken very seriously, sharing someone's picture publicly without consent could even lead to legal issues. Avoid cultural stereotypes. Jokes or memes based on national or ethnic cliches might seem funny to you, but can feel degrading to others. A simple, harmless joke about eating habits or accents might perpetuate stereotypes that people are tired of hearing. Remember, humor doesn't always translate, and online it stays forever. Give credit where it's due. In the West, reposting someone's content without tagging them might just seem lazy. But in many Asian cultures, copying without acknowledgement can be seen as extremely disrespectful, almost like stealing intellectual honor. Tagging or referencing the original creator isn't just etiquette. It's respect. Tone down extreme emotions. While being passionate is good, going to extremes, especially in public comment threads, can escalate quickly. Cultures differ on how they handle disagreements. Americans might engage in open debate. Japanese or Korean users may prefer private messages or softening language to avoid public conflict. So when in doubt, keep things calm and factual. Remember, context is everything. What's funny, polite or acceptable in one circle might not be in another. Adaptation doesn't mean losing authenticity. It means learning to communicate in a way that others can receive positively. One fascinating case study that highlights these principles is how global brands manage their social media presence. Take Airbnb, for example. Its brand message, "belong anywhere," sounds universal. But how it's expressed online varies by region. In the US, Airbnb's posts often emphasize individuality and adventure. Find your next getaway. Explore more. Live free. In Japan, the same brand's tone shifts toward harmony and comfort. Feel at home, wherever you go. The difference reflects local values, independence versus harmony. The company doesn't just translate words, it translates values. Similarly, McDonald's social media team in India focuses heavily on vegetarian options and family togetherness, while in the US, it highlights convenience and promotions. That's not coincidence. That's cultural fluency in action. Even the choice of colors in graphics or emojis changes, because color symbolism varies dramatically across cultures. Red, for example, means luck and celebration in China, but can represent danger or anger in Western contexts. Blue conveys trust in the US, but in some parts of the Middle East it's associated with mourning. Global companies know this, and they adjust accordingly. Individuals can do the same. Another dimension to consider is cross-cultural communication in the workplace, especially as remote collaboration becomes the norm. In multinational teams, misunderstandings often happen not because people disagree, but because they communicate differently online. Take the simple act of writing an email or message. Americans often use casual greetings like "hey" or "hi team," followed by brief friendly language. In contrast, in Japan or Germany, formal openings like "Dear Mr. Tanaka" or "Good morning, everyone" are more appropriate. Even emojis have different levels of acceptability. Some companies in the West encourage them for warmth, while in traditional Asian companies, they may be considered unprofessional. Time zones, too, influence etiquette. Sending a message outside working hours may be fine in the US, but in countries like France, where right to disconnect laws exist, it could be viewed as intrusive. So before sending that 2 a.m. Slack message, consider whether it aligns with your teammates' local norms. Building awareness of these patterns isn't about walking on eggshells. It's about showing respect. And that small effort often leads to smoother collaboration, stronger trust, and fewer unnecessary conflicts. Let's talk about something we don't mention often enough: the emotional side of cultural misunderstandings online. When people feel misunderstood or disrespected on social media, it's not just about words, it's about identity. Culture isn't just where we're from, it's who we are. So when someone mocks or dismisses our way of expressing ourselves, it can feel like a personal attack, even if that wasn't the intent. That's why digital empathy is so powerful. It's not just being nice online. It's about recognizing the emotional weight that language, tone, and timing can carry. It's about pausing before replying to a heated comment and thinking, what cultural perspective might this person be coming from? That single pause can turn potential conflict into understanding. And that's something our global digital culture desperately needs. Fewer quick reactions, more thoughtful reflections. Now, one question people often ask is, can we ever have a global standard for social media etiquette? Probably not in the strict sense, and that's actually a good thing, because diversity is what makes the online world vibrant. If everyone acted the same, spoke the same, and posted the same, social media would be unbearably dull. What we can have, though, is a shared foundation, a mindset of cultural curiosity and respect. Instead of assuming my way is right, we start asking, why does their way make sense to them? This is where the concept of cultural intelligence, or CQ, comes in. CQ is like emotional intelligence, but for navigating differences. It's the ability to adapt your communication style across cultural contexts. People with high CQ don't just tolerate differences. They use them as opportunities to learn and connect. Online, CQ might look like this. You notice a comment that seems harsh, but instead of replying defensively, you ask for clarification. You adapt your humor for an international audience. You celebrate cultural holidays or traditions you learn about online, showing appreciation for diversity. Over time, this awareness builds trust, and trust is the real currency of the digital age. Let's also acknowledge that power dynamics influence online etiquette. Not everyone has equal freedom of expression. In some regions, people self-censor because of political or social pressures. In others, marginalized groups may face harassment for simply speaking up. So, part of being respectful online is creating safe spaces where diverse voices can be heard without judgment or fear. If you manage a community, a classroom, or a brand page, this matters even more. Setting clear boundaries for respectful discourse isn't censorship, it's care. It's saying, we value your voice, but we also value each other's dignity. When we normalize empathy and respect online, we slowly shift the culture of social media from chaos to connection. It's worth reflecting, too, on how technology itself influences etiquette. Algorithms reward engagement, not necessarily kindness. Posts that spark outrage often get more visibility than thoughtful ones. That's why it takes conscious effort to uphold digital manners. When we choose to respond thoughtfully, instead of react impulsively, when we choose to understand rather than attack, we're quietly pushing back against an attention economy that profits from division. And here's the beautiful part. When you practice good etiquette online, when you model respect, curiosity, and humility, people notice. Your tone becomes contagious. You create ripples of positivity that extend beyond your own circle. In a way, digital etiquette is like planting seeds. You might not see the tree grow immediately, but it takes root in every interaction you nurture. So what can we all do starting today? Here are a few simple yet powerful habits to cultivate global digital grace. Think before you post. Ask yourself, who might see this? How could it be perceived in different contexts? Ask, don't assume. If you're unsure about a cultural reference or tone, just ask politely. Curiosity builds connection. Be mindful with humor. If you wouldn't say it in front of a diverse audience, maybe don't post it online. Adapt. Don't erase. You don't need to hide your personality. You just adjust your delivery so others can understand it better. Celebrate diversity. Follow creators from different backgrounds. Engage with perspectives outside your comfort zone. That's how empathy grows. Not from theory, but from exposure. At its core, social media etiquette across cultures isn't about a list of do's and don'ts. It's about developing a mindset, one that values understanding over judgment, listening over reacting, and respect over ego. Because when we treat online spaces with the same courtesy we'd show in someone's home, everything changes. Conversations become kinder. Collaboration becomes easier. Differences become bridges instead of barriers. Imagine if every time we logged onto a platform, we carried the quiet awareness that we're stepping into a shared global room, full of people with different languages, beliefs, and histories. We'd post differently, we'd comment differently, we'd listen more, and maybe, just maybe, we'd start to see social media not as a battlefield of opinions, but as a tapestry of human expression. That's the real promise of digital connection, not faster communication, but deeper understanding. When etiquette becomes empathy, and empathy becomes habit, the digital world doesn't just connect us, it humanizes us. So next time you're online, take a breath before you post. Smile at the thought that your words might travel across oceans and time zones, landing in someone's feed thousands of miles away. And remember, every interaction, no matter how small, is a chance to show the world who you are, and the kind of respect you bring to the shared global table we call the internet. Because in the end, etiquette isn't about rules. It's about respect. And respect, in any language, in any culture, is universal. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Digital Mindset Podcast. Stay curious, stay kind, and keep connecting thoughtfully.